When my mother died, I had a supernatural experience. When my mother died, I had a supernatural experience. It was Christmas Eve in a small town in central Wisconsin, and it was snowing. Now, when it snows in central Wisconsin, it's not those cute little dusty flakes that you see as a backdrop on the Hallmark Channel so two chronic B-listers can fall in love. No, 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 no. When it snows in central Wisconsin, the flakes are bigger than Pat Sajak's head. When it snows in central Wisconsin, the flakes are so big they have their own zip code. Central Wisconsin produces more white stuff than the Cali cartel. It was like growing up in Russia, except there was only one time zone. As I'm driving to this hospital in the middle of nowhere, I know in my heart, in my mind, and in my soul that today's the day my mother's gonna die. I can feel it. She'd been sick for a long time. And as I was driving, I began to wonder and ask, why is God taking so long to take her? And the more I thought about it, the more vexed I became, and the more vexed I became, the more pissed off I came, and I started to yell at God. Hey, Mr. Big Shot, Master of the universe, are you paying attention here? I thought you were a loving God. I thought you were a healing God. I thought you were a comforting God. You know what? You're not. You're not any of that. In fact, you know what I think? I think you are a fraud. You're a fraud. If you don't take my mother today, you're a fraud. Everything has a beginning, everything has a middle, everything has an end. Call me a nut, pal, but I think we're at the end. Do your job. Now, by this time, I'd arrived at the hospital, and my favorite part of the day, which is getting into the parking structure. I hate parking structures. They make me sweat profusely. Parking structures make me sweat like a vegan at Outback. Parking structures make me sweat like a Sherpa at sea level. Dude, I'm sweating like a millennial at a job fair. And as I'm attempting to punch in the 94-digit secret code, which will link me to 4 algorithms so I can answer today's secret question, which is, which horse won the Kentucky Derby twice, it occurred to me, today, it is going to be easier for my mom to die than it is for me to get into this parking structure. But I made it. I made it. And as I approached the hospital, I knew that when I entered the doors, I was going to be greeted by this tsunami of these faux, sorrowful expressions of grief. This is a town of 3,000 people. And in 3,000 people towns, everybody knows everybody else. More importantly, everybody knows everybody else's business. And when you are the child of a parent waiting to die, you become sort of this parent waiting to die celebrity. And sure enough, as soon as I hit those doors, it was like, oh, Ziggy, we're so sorry. Yes, it was Katharine Hepburn from On Golden Pond. Oh, Ziggy, we're so sorry. Is there anything we can do for your mother? Well, I'm like, her barn could use a coat of paint, and her van's about a quart low. And then my favorite faux sorrowful expression of grief of all time. Oh, Ziggy, she's going to a better place. I'm like, really? How do you know she's going to a better place? Because if you really knew my mother, you would know she was involved in some pretty sketchy stuff. In fact, if my mother getting into heaven was a Las Vegas proposition bet, take the under. Now, I am a weak and selfish individual, and I do not like unpleasant things. I am a weak and selfish individual. I do not like unpleasant things. My favorite movie of all time is The Sound of Music, and there's parts of that I can't even watch. Like when Liesel's gonna kiss Nazi, that treacherous little Nazi punk out in the gazebo when it's starting to rain. Every time I'm like, Liesel, don't do it. Don't kiss the Nazi. By the way, there is justice in the world. Rolf later joined the SS and was killed at Stalingrad when he was run over by a Soviet T-34 tank. But I digress. I am a weak and selfish individual. I do not like unpleasant things. And the thought occurred to me, I had never seen anyone die. And the thought occurred to me, I don't really ever want to see anyone die. I mean, what is this going to be like? Is it going to be pleading and begging, please, gurgling, screaming? I didn't want to see it. I don't think I could take it. So as I stood there in the stairwell of that small hospital in the middle of nowhere, I had to collect my thoughts and think about my relationship with my mom. My mother and I did not have a good relationship. My mother was beautiful, my mother was brilliant, and my mother was pissed off. She was born in 1920. She graduated from high school in 1938, summa cum laude, valedictorian of her class. She went to college, graduated from college in 1942, summa cum laude, valedictorian of her class. Most women didn't even get to go to college in 1942, and if they did, they studied two things: teaching, nursing, wonderful professions, purposeful professions, life-changing professions. But architecture, law, medicine, engineering, forget it. It was off the table. By the time my mother graduated from college in 1942, she'd taken 4 levels of calculus. It's 2023. I didn't even know there were 2 levels of calculus. I firmly believe that if she had been born in 1980 and not 1920, she would have been the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court or the head of NASA, maybe both. Maybe both. But she wasn't. And in 1948, she married the wrong guy, had 6 kids, and squandered the best part of her life changing diapers in some podunk town in central Wisconsin. I'd have been pissed off too. And for some reason, I never quite figured out why. Of the 6 kids she brought into this world, I became the focal point of her rage. Nothing I did was right. Nothing I did was good. Nothing I did was acknowledged. It did not feel well. It made me want to be alone. I was frequently emotionally abused, occasionally physically abused. Her favorite weapon of choice was a yellow plastic wiffle ball bat. My mother ended her life with more career hits than Pete Rose. I had to put a punchline in there. It was getting pretty heavy. But here's what I did figure out. Here's what I did finally figure out. When you are emotionally and physically abused by someone that you are deeply and viscerally connected to by 6,000 years of DNA, you never get over it. You never get over it. I never got over it. I figured out how to deal with it in my own half-assed way. I figured out how to recognize it in my own half-assed way, but the price was colossal. So as I stood there at the bottom of this stairwell in this rundown little hospital in the middle of nowhere, I had to make a decision. And I had to make a decision now. Right now. Was I going to take the last few hours, maybe minutes, of my mother's life and try and find a new beginning? Try and find a place to do some healing? I really wondered if I could do that. I didn't know. I didn't know. And so I inhaled deeply, and I began to ascend the stairs to watch my mother die. I walked into her room. She was over to the left. She was in a fetal position under some hospital blankets. She hadn't spoken or moved for 3 days. And someone had woven this beautiful red and black quilt. And it was from the native peoples of the area, and it had all the indigenous peoples' symbols on there, a bird and some clouds and trees and a stream flowing through. It was beautiful. And as I stood at the base of her bed and looked at her and looked at that quilt, I thought, there must be something I can do here. There's got to be something I can do. And I looked down and I saw her right foot protruding from underneath the quilt. My mother had beautiful feet. They had these wonderfully natural high arches and these stiletto toes that came together. My mother's feet could have been in the Museum of Modern Art. My mother's feet could have been the foot model for the Jimmy Cho spring collection of open-toed pumps. There isn't a dude in this whorehouse who knows what I'm talking about right now. And I spotted some hospital lubricating lotion. And I thought, I'm going to give my mom a foot massage. And while I give her a foot massage, we're going to have the conversation we should have had a long time ago. When I rubbed her foot, I said, Mom, I'm sorry you were born at a time in our country's history where women had to put up with a lot. I'm sorry, Mom, that you were born at a time in our country's history where women had to work 3 times as hard to make a third much money. I'm sorry, Mom. Mom, I'm sorry that you were born way before the Me Too movement and you had to put up with a lot. I'm sorry. But Mom, I didn't do any of that to you. I didn't do any of that to you. And all I wanted from you was the love and affirmation that every son wants from his mother. That's all I wanted. But you didn't have it. And I never got it. Now, when I said the words, got it, she didn't stir. She didn't rustle. She sat straight up. She sat straight up. And she was looking at me, but she wasn't looking at me. She was looking through me. And she began to speak to me, but she wasn't speaking to me. She was speaking to someone else. And she said, how long can this go on? And she lay back down. And she died. I knew she died, not because there was any wheezing, or pleading, or begging. No. I knew she died because as I was standing at the end of her bed, I felt this wave of energy pass through my body. It wasn't unpleasant. or uncomfortable. But it passed through me and it took my breath away. And I had to kneel down after you just finished a long run and put my hands on my knees and catch my breath. Now, this is where the supernatural part comes in. As I was breathing and reflecting and trying to collect my thoughts, I smell this smell. It wasn't unpleasant. It was the same smell you smelled at the end of the 4th of July, when you're at the bottom of your friend's driveway and they've exploded all the fireworks and there's that haze in the sky, that smell. And I looked up and I saw this cloud, this small cloud. It was about the size if you had 3 scented candles and you blew them out. It was about that size. And it was gray and churlish and dark with a little bit of orange and purple and black. And it was leaving my mother's body. And as I stood there and watched my mother's soul leave her body, as I stood there and witnessed my mother's toiling soul leaving her body, as I stood there and witnessed my mother's tortured and tormented and troubled soul rise up into the light of a raging Wisconsin snowstorm, I finally understood. Thank you.